They sat me by the trash at the wedding I paid for. I smiled, then canceled the music, drinks, and flowers. Subscribe to this channel and comment where you're watching from. They pushed my wheelchair next to the ornate trash bins at my great-granddaughter's wedding, a wedding I paid $300,000 for. The orchestra played Pachelbel as guests sipped vintage champagne under crystal chandeliers. My son never mentioned my name in his toast. My granddaughter walked past without a glance, and when I tried to congratulate the bride, she suggested I should rest in my room. At 92, I've learned patience. I've built empires while they built entitlement. Now it's time they learn what happens when the hand that feeds gets bitten. My name is Eleanor Blackwood, and this is how I taught my family the value of respect. I felt the wheels of my chair bump against something. Miguel, my assistant, stopped pushing and leaned down to whisper, "Mrs. Blackwood, I can find a better spot." "No," I said, my eyes fixed on the ornate trash bins now flanking me. "This is perfect." The Newport Historical Mansion glittered with lights that reflected off crystal glasses and diamond jewelry, much of it purchased with my money. The final envelope containing payment for this extravagant wedding sat heavy in my lap. $300,000 for my great-granddaughter Amber's special day. My son Thomas raised his glass at the head table, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "To the union of our families," he proclaimed, never once mentioning who had funded this lavish affair. Victoria, his wife, fingered the diamond necklace I'd given her for her birthday last year while whispering to the woman beside her. "Poor Eleanor," I heard her say, not realizing I could still hear perfectly well. "She won't be with us much longer." I've heard that prediction for 20 years now. A server passed by, averting his eyes from my corner. Not a single family member had come to speak with me since the ceremony. My granddaughter Melissa, mother of the bride, was too busy ensuring everything looked perfect for the photographs. The wedding planner approached, his practiced smile not reaching his eyes. "Mrs. Blackwood, Amber asked me to inform you that it might be better if you rested now. We've prepared a plate for you to eat in your room." Behind him, I caught Amber's gaze. My great-granddaughter, resplendent in her $85,000 Vera Wang gown, glanced at me with barely disguised irritation before turning back to the photographer with a radiant smile. Something crystallized inside me in that moment. Not anger, I'm too old for such wasteful emotions, but clarity. After decades of manipulation, I finally saw with perfect clarity what I had created. A family of entitled parasites who saw me as nothing but a convenient ATM with an expiration date. I nodded to Miguel, who had worked with me for 10 years and knew every financial secret that kept the Blackwood family living in luxury. "Miguel," I whispered, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "It's time for Protocol Cinderella." His eyes widened slightly. "Are you certain, Mrs. Blackwood? We established this plan 3 years ago, but I never thought—" I smiled, feeling a strange lightness spread through me. "At 92, Miguel, certainty is one of the few luxuries I have in abundance." I glanced down at the check in my lap. It's time they learned the value of what they've always taken for granted. My fingers, arthritic but still functional, reached for my phone. I pulled up a message I'd drafted long ago but never expected to send. 3 simple words to my team of attorneys: "Execute Protocol Cinderella." Miguel wheeled me toward the exit as I pressed send. No one noticed us leaving. They were too busy celebrating with my money. Their education was about to begin. 1 week before the wedding disaster, I sat in my office overlooking Manhattan, the city I helped rebuild after the fiscal crisis of the 1970s. The Blackwood Enterprises logo gleamed on the wall, a reminder of the real estate empire I constructed after Robert died in 1965, leaving me a 35-year-old widow with a small son and large ambitions. "Mrs. Blackwood?" Miguel entered with another stack of wedding invoices. "The florist needs approval for the additional Dutch orchids. Another $50,000. I signed without hesitation, though the irony wasn't lost on me. My own wedding had been a simple ceremony during a recession. Since then, I'd made it my mission to provide lavish weddings for all the women in my family. "You know, Miguel," I said, gazing at the skyline I helped shape, "I established the Cinderella Protocol 3 years ago as a precaution, never thinking I'd activate it." "What made you create such a contingency plan?" Miguel asked, organizing the invoices with his usual efficiency. I slid a file across my desk. Inside, Years of documented slights, cruel comments, and financial manipulations by my family. Small moments of dismissal that accumulated like snowflakes until they became an avalanche. It's not paranoia when there's evidence, I said. And if I ever needed to teach a lesson about gratitude, I wanted to be prepared. That evening, I visited my private vault at Manhattan Trust. Inside was a collection of legal documents that would redefine my family's future. 3 different law firms, offshore accounts, alternative corporate structures, all designed for a day I hoped would never come. I remembered Thomas's 21st birthday, how I'd given him partial ownership in a promising development. He sold his shares 3 months later to buy a sports car. Victoria's shopping sprees, always with my credit card. Melissa's failed businesses that I repeatedly bailed out. And Amber, perhaps my greatest disappointment. Born into wealth she never earned, raised to expect luxury as her birthright. The Instagram influencer who shared every extravagant moment of her life with strangers, but couldn't spare 5 minutes to visit her great-grandmother unless she needed something. Back in my penthouse, I took my evening medications while watching the sunset paint Manhattan gold. On my nightstand sat a framed photo of Robert and me in 1963, standing in front of our first property investment, a rundown brownstone we renovated ourselves. I wonder if I did them a disservice, I whispered to his memory, by making everything too easy. My phone buzzed with a text from Amber. Bisabuela, could you transfer another $20K for the wedding? Found the perfect shoes. Love you. No call, no visit, just another withdrawal request from the Bank of Eleanor. I put down the phone without responding and made my decision. Sometimes true love means establishing boundaries, even at 92. Oh my God, you guys! My great-grandma is literally the best! Amber's voice echoed through the exclusive Manhattan Club hosting her bachelorette party. She waved her diamond-encrusted phone at the camera, live-streaming to her 250,000 Instagram followers. She just transferred $20,000 for my wedding shoes. I didn't even have to ask twice. I watched the video later that night, sent to me by Miguel, who monitored social media for business purposes. What Amber didn't show her followers was that she hadn't visited me in 3 months, despite living 20 minutes away. The next morning, I attended a wedding planning meeting at Amber's insistence. Though attended might be generous, they seated me in the corner while the planner reviewed final details. The ice sculpture needs to be taller, Amber insisted, scrolling through her phone as she spoke. And we need the Dom Perignon for toasts, not the Veuve Clicquot. The wedding planner winced. Miss Blackwood, that would add another... Don't worry about the budget, Amber interrupted with an eye roll. My great-grandmother will cover it. She always does. She glanced my way briefly. Right, bisabuela? Before I could answer, she'd already turned back to the planner. I was merely the checkbook in the corner. That evening, I invited Jason, Amber's fiancé, for tea. Unlike the rest of them, he came from a middle-class family that valued hard work. I'd always appreciated his quiet dignity. Mrs. Blackwood, he said, accepting the cup from Miguel, I wanted to thank you personally for your generosity. This wedding is beyond anything my parents could have provided. You seem uncomfortable with its extravagance, I observed. He hesitated. It's just, shouldn't we be focusing on building our future together rather than one elaborate day? And what does Amber think about that? She says this is normal for your family. He shifted in his seat. Mrs. Blackwood, may I ask something? Why aren't you more involved in the planning? You're financing everything, but they barely include you. I studied him carefully. Perhaps I've enabled certain expectations over the years. I suggested we should include you more in the preparations, he admitted. But Amber said you're... He stopped, embarrassed. Senile? I supplied. Too old to have relevant opinions? His silence was answer enough. After he left, I opened my laptop and reviewed the contracts I'd established with every wedding vendor. Each agreement contained 2 special clauses: 50% payment up front, non-refundable, with the remaining 50% due after the event, and the option to cancel services without penalty up to 24 hours after the reception began. Miguel entered with my evening medication. He seems like a good man, he said, nodding toward the door Jason had exited. Yes, I agreed. I wonder if he knows what he's marrying into. I closed the laptop, my decision solidifying. Miguel, call Christine in Maine. Tell her to prepare the house. And contact the attorneys. I want to review the final documents for Protocol Cinderella. You're really going through with this? He looked concerned. I gazed at the Manhattan skyline I'd helped build. The problem with creating a safety net for people, Miguel, is that they never learn to fly on their own. The car is ready, Mrs. Blackwood. Miguel stood in the doorway of my bedroom as I finished packing essentials. Not much. At 92, you learn what truly matters. And the documents? I asked, closing my suitcase. All prepared. The attorneys confirmed everything is in order. We drove to Miguel's Brooklyn apartment, a spacious loft I'd helped him purchase 5 years ago. It would serve as our command center for the next phase of Protocol Cinderella. Walk me through it again, I said, as he helped me settle into his guest room, adapted for my needs months earlier. Miguel laid out folders on the bed. All vendors have signed the special contracts. First payment made, second contingent on your approval after the ceremony begins. He opened another folder. Your medical evaluations from 3 separate neurologists, all confirming your cognitive clarity and legal capacity. Full power of attorney documents giving me authority to execute financial decisions in your absence. And the transfers? Completed last week. 80% of your liquid assets moved to the secure accounts only accessible by you and the trustee. The remaining 20%, still substantial by any standard, left in the family accounts to prevent immediate suspicion. I nodded, reviewing each document. 3 years of careful planning. Moving assets incrementally to avoid raising alarms. A 1,000-piece puzzle being assembled one careful piece at a time. And the main property? Fully prepared. Elevator installed, ramps, medical equipment, and Christine arrives tomorrow to set up. The nearest hospital is 12 minutes away, and your doctor has arranged care with their chief of geriatrics. I signed the final authorization forms, my hand steady despite the arthritis. Has there been any indication they suspect? None. Thomas called yesterday to discuss increasing his monthly allowance. Victoria's assistant scheduled another art acquisition meeting for next month. Melissa asked about using the Hamptons house for a charity event. And Amber? Miguel hesitated. She requested another $20,000 this morning for honeymoon upgrades. I closed my eyes briefly. Did you transfer it? Yes, as you instructed, maintaining normal patterns until execution. Thunder rumbled outside, a summer storm approaching. Appropriate weather for what was coming. What about Jason? I asked. He's innocent in all this. The separate account you established for him remains untouched. They won't be able to access it when everything else freezes. I wheeled myself to the window, watching lightning illuminate the Brooklyn skyline. Do you think I'm being cruel, Miguel? He considered this carefully. I think you're being instructive. There's a difference. Thomas is 65 years old and has never held a real job. Victoria spends more on handbags than most families earn in a year. Melissa has bankrupted 3 businesses I financed. And Amber, I sighed. Amber doesn't even know who she is without wealth to define her. Then perhaps it's time she found out, Miguel said quietly. I turned from the window. We're not taking everything, just enough to wake them up. And if they don't wake up? I smiled sadly. Then I've failed as a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. But at least I'll have tried one last time to help them become the people they could be. And if they contest it legally, they won't win. I tapped the folders. Everything is airtight. Besides, what jury would side against a 92-year-old woman disrespected by her family? The storm broke outside, rain lashing against the windows. In 3 days, a different kind of storm would break over the Blackwood family. The wedding day arrived, Newport's historical mansion transformed into a fairy tale setting. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above tables draped in imported silk. Flower arrangements taller than me adorned every corner. The air smelled of roses, money, and entitlement. Miguel wheeled me through the entrance early. I'd insisted on seeing the final preparations, my last gift to myself before everything changed. Melissa spotted us immediately, her face tightening. "Grandmother, you're so early. The guests won't arrive for hours." I wanted to see what $300,000 looks like in flowers, I replied pleasantly. Her smile froze. "Well, the coordinator has everything under control. Perhaps Miguel could take you to the bridal suite? Amber might want to say hello." We both knew she wouldn't. The ceremony proceeded beautifully, sunlight streaming through stained glass as Amber glided down the aisle. I watched from the back row, where they'd placed me near the emergency exits and decorative waste baskets. Thomas walked Amber down the aisle, chest puffed with pride for a wedding he hadn't paid a dime toward. During the reception, I observed my family performing for their audience, Thomas playing the successful businessman, Victoria showcasing the diamond necklace I'd given her, Melissa orchestrating everything with practiced precision. A waiter approached with champagne, then hesitated upon seeing me. "Don't worry," I told him. "I'm still allowed alcohol. The doctors say at my age it can't make much difference." He laughed nervously and handed me a glass. I sipped slowly, checking my watch. 7:43. Everything was proceeding exactly as scheduled. Amber floated through the reception, posing for photographs and accepting congratulations. When she approached my corner, I straightened in my wheelchair. "Bisabuela," she said, bending slightly for the photographer to capture our moment. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me," I replied. "And congratulations." She glanced at her watch. "You must be tired. We've had a plate prepared for you in your room if you'd like to rest." Before I could respond, she was swept away by Victoria for more photos, the moment captured perfectly on the photographer's camera. Amber smiling brilliantly, me a withered afterthought in the background. I caught Miguel's eye from across the room and nodded slightly. He excused himself from conversation and stepped outside, phone in hand. At precisely 10:43, as the dancing reached its peak, I pressed the button on my phone. A simple text, "Now." 2 minutes later, the orchestra stopped mid-song. The conductor checked his phone, spoke quietly to the musicians, and they began packing their instruments. Simultaneously, waiters started collecting champagne glasses. Bar staff closed the premium liquor stations. The massive floral centerpieces were discreetly removed by the florist's staff. Confusion rippled through the reception. Amber rushed to the wedding planner, her face flushed with anger. Thomas pulled out his wallet, only to have his credit card declined. Victoria's frantic calls to their accountant went straight to voicemail. I signaled Miguel to wheel me out during the confusion. No one noticed our departure. They were too busy trying to salvage what remained of their perfect day. In the car waiting outside, I watched through the window as the exterior lights of the mansion dimmed, leaving only security illumination. "Protocol Cinderella is active," Miguel confirmed, checking his tablet. "Then it's time for me to rest," I said, as my great-granddaughter suggested. The car pulled away from the chaos I'd orchestrated, heading toward a future neither I nor my family had truly prepared for. The morning after the wedding disaster, I watched the sunrise from the porch of my main home. The Atlantic stretched before me, constant in ways family had never been. My wheelchair fit perfectly in the space designed for it, one of many modifications made to this property over the past year. Christine, my new nurse, brought coffee. "Your blood pressure is excellent this morning, Mrs. Blackwood, especially considering the circumstances." Miguel's tablet chimed with incoming messages. "It's beginning," he said. "Thomas has been trying to access the main account since 5 a.m. Victoria called the bank president directly. Apparently they play golf together. Melissa is threatening legal action against the wedding vendors." "And Amber?" I asked. 37 missed calls on your phone, 15 texts. The last one says, "How could you do this to me?" I sipped my coffee, feeling the weight of 92 years in my bones. Not regret, I was past that, but the heaviness of necessary disappointment. "Are they still at the hotel?" I asked. "Yes. They've been informed they need to settle the remaining balance by noon checkout." I nodded. "Make sure Jason's separate account is activated. He shouldn't suffer for marrying into this mess." Miguel hesitated. "He hasn't accessed it. The notification was sent to his phone, but the funds remain untouched." Interesting. By noon, Miguel confirmed the family had gathered in the Manhattan penthouse, my penthouse, trying to make sense of their new reality. The security system recorded their arrival, their frantic searching for documents, their increasingly desperate phone calls. "They found the first letter," Miguel reported, watching the security feed on his tablet. On screen, Thomas held the envelope I'd left in my desk. His hands shook as he read aloud to the others. "Dear family, if you're reading this, you've discovered that access to the primary Blackwood accounts has been temporarily suspended. This is not a mistake or a technical error. It is a deliberate reset. For too long, I've enabled behaviors that have prevented you from becoming the people you're capable of being. Consider this an opportunity to discover your potential without the constant safety net I've provided." Victoria grabbed the letter. "This is insane. She can't do this legally." "Actually, she can," Miguel told me as we watched. "They're about to discover just how thoroughly you've prepared." By evening, they'd called all 3 of my attorneys, only to be informed that everything had been executed legally. They'd contacted the banks, only to learn that the account structures had been gradually, legitimately altered over 3 years. They'd even called Adult Protective Services, suggesting I was being manipulated, only to be presented with my recent neurological evaluations. Time for phase 2, I told Miguel after dinner. Send the individual assessments. Each family member would receive a personalized document detailing their financial reality. Thomas's $50,000 monthly allowance, suspended. Victoria's shopping accounts, frozen. Melissa's mortgage, now due at market rate. Amber's wedding gifts, redirected to savings she couldn't access without completing specific requirements. They'll fight this, Miguel warned. Of course they will, I agreed. People don't surrender privilege easily. On my tablet, I pulled up the video I'd recorded months earlier, my face clearer, my voice stronger than my current state suggested. When they're ready, I told Miguel. When they've exhausted all other options, show them this, not before. In the video, I looked directly at the camera, at my family, at the people who had become strangers despite my blood running through their veins. This isn't punishment, my recorded self said. It's your inheritance, not of wealth, but of something far more valuable, the chance to discover who you are when everything is stripped away. I closed the tablet, turning my wheelchair toward the ocean. The hardest part of love is knowing when to stop protecting people from consequences. 2 weeks after the wedding, the family's carefully constructed world continued unraveling. Thomas discovered his executive position at Blackwood Enterprises had been largely ceremonial, his signature required, but his presence optional. When he attempted to liquidate company assets, he found his authority had been systematically reduced through legitimate board actions over the previous 3 years. Victoria's social circle evaporated when she could no longer host lavish parties or attend charity galas as a major donor. Her friends stopped returning calls when she couldn't maintain appearances. Melissa and her husband received notice that the mansion they'd lived in for 15 years, owned by a Blackwood subsidiary, would now charge market-rate rent, a 400% increase from their nominal family rate. And Amber, whose honeymoon to Bora Bora had been canceled, moved with Jason into a 1-bedroom Brooklyn apartment that his teacher's salary could afford. Miguel monitored it all, providing daily reports as I settled into my main routine. Mornings on the porch, afternoons reviewing business matters with my remaining loyal executives via secure video calls, evenings writing in my journal, documenting this unconventional final chapter of my life. They've hired a private investigator, Miguel informed me one morning. To find you. I nodded, unsurprised. How long will it take? We've established enough misdirection to give us 3 weeks, maybe 4. Good. They need time to feel the reality of their situation before confronting me. That afternoon, a secure email arrived from Jason, not Amber. I read it twice before calling Miguel. He's reached out independently, I told him. He wants to meet, alone. 3 days later, Jason arrived at a neutral location, a restaurant in Portland owned by a corporation not visibly connected to Blackwood Enterprises. Miguel vetted him thoroughly before I agreed to the meeting. Mrs. Blackwood, Jason said, rising as I was wheeled to the private dining room. He looked thinner, his eyes shadowed from stress. Please sit, Jason. You look exhausted. He managed a weak smile. It's been educational. I imagine so. How is married life treating you? His hands fidgeted with the water glass. Amber is struggling. They all are. That was inevitable. Why did you do it? He asked directly. Why not just cut them off completely? Why the elaborate setup at the wedding? I studied him carefully. Do you remember what Amber said to me at the reception? She suggested you rest in your room, after I spent $300,000 on her perfect day. After I built the empire that funded their lives, after I created everything they take for granted. I leaned forward. It wasn't just that moment, Jason. It was thousands of moments like it over decades. So it was revenge? No. If I wanted revenge, I would have simply changed my will and died peacefully, letting them discover their disinheritance when it was too late to change anything. This wasn't about punishment. It was about possibility. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're giving them a chance to change. I'm giving them the only gift I never gave them before, necessity. I sipped my water. Tell me about Amber. Not what she's saying, but what she's doing. She tried to monetize her social media. When that didn't generate enough income, she applied for retail jobs, but her resume was limited. He hesitated. Yesterday she enrolled in community college courses. Something warmed in my chest. And the others? Thomas is drinking heavily. Victoria is trying to sell her jewelry collection. Melissa's husband has taken a second job. He met my eyes. They're angry. They're going to find you eventually. I'm counting on it. I slid an envelope across the table. This contains information about an account in your name only. Amber can't access it. Neither can her family. He pushed it back without opening it. I didn't marry Amber for money. No, you married her despite it. I respected his rejection. What will you do now? Stand by my wife. Help her become the person I believe she can be. As he rose to leave, I asked one final question. Do they know you've met with me? No. His expression was complicated. Some journeys people need to make on their own. After he left, Miguel emerged from the adjoining room where he'd monitored the meeting. He didn't take the money, I observed. No, Miguel agreed. Perhaps there's hope for them after all. Perhaps. I stared out the window at the Maine coastline. But hope requires pressure to crystallize into change. And we're just getting started. After 6 weeks of financial freefall, the family finally tracked me to Maine. Miguel informed me they were driving up from New York, having pooled their remaining resources for the journey. They've been preparing their approach, he said, showing me their text exchanges intercepted through the security systems I still controlled. Thomas wants to claim you're incompetent. Victoria suggests emotional manipulation. Melissa is advocating for legal threats. And Amber? Surprisingly quiet in the group chat. She's coming but hasn't contributed to their strategy. I spent the morning on the porch, watching the ocean, while mentally preparing for the confrontation. At 92, I'd seen enough of life to know that the most important battles are won before they begin. They arrived at noon. I instructed Miguel to let them all enter rather than meeting them separately. Better to face the storm all at once. Thomas entered first, his confident stride faltering when he saw me. Perhaps he'd expected to find me diminished, confused, an easy target for their manipulations. Instead, I sat in my wheelchair, back straight, mind clear, with Miguel and Christine flanking me like sentinels. Mother, Thomas began. Thomas, his voice attempting warmth it didn't contain. We've been so worried. Have you? I replied evenly. How concerned you must have been while trying to drain the remaining accounts and sell company assets. Victoria stepped forward, the diamond necklace conspicuously absent from her throat. Eleanor, this situation is completely unnecessary. We're family. Indeed. That's precisely why we're here. Melissa remained silent, her eyes cataloging the house, assessing its value, no doubt. Amber entered last, hanging back near the doorway. She'd lost weight, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her eyes met mine briefly before dropping to the floor. Please sit, I said, gesturing to the chairs arranged before me. I imagine you have questions. Questions? Thomas's composure cracked. You've destroyed our lives, frozen our accounts, canceled Amber's wedding reception, humiliated us publicly. Your lives aren't destroyed, Thomas. They're simply no longer subsidized. Victoria leaned forward, adopting the sympathetic tone she used for charity functions. Eleanor, we understand you might have felt underappreciated. We can address that. But this dramatic response is disproportionate to any perceived slight. Perceived? I raised an eyebrow. Was it a perception that my great-granddaughter seated me by the trash at her wedding? That my granddaughter hasn't asked about my health in 5 years? That my son calls only when he needs money? This is ridiculous. Melissa finally spoke. You're a vindictive old woman punishing your family because we don't worship at your feet. Is that what you believe this is about? Worship? What else? Thomas demanded. You built this empire and lord it over us, using money to control our lives. Control? I laughed softly. My dear son, if I wanted control, I would have simply required you to work for your allowance. What you've experienced isn't control, it's its absence. For the first time, you're facing the consequences of your own choices. Victoria's facade cracked. What do you want from us? Groveling? Public apologies? What will it take to end this cruelty? I studied each of their faces. The anger, the entitlement, the bewilderment of people facing an inconvenience they couldn't buy their way out of. I want nothing from you, I said finally. That's what you fail to understand. This isn't a negotiation where you can offer the right words to restore the status quo. The old arrangement is gone permanently. You can't do this, Thomas shouted, rising from his chair. We'll contest this legally. You're clearly not mentally competent. Miguel silently placed a folder on the table. Inside, comprehensive neurological evaluations from 3 separate specialists, dated just weeks earlier. Beside them, documentation of every legal step taken to restructure the family finances, all executed gradually, legitimately, over years. "You're welcome to try," I said calmly, "but I've had decades to plan this moment. Do you really believe I left anything to chance?" As reality settled over them, Amber finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "What happens now?" It was the first honest question anyone had asked. The confrontation continued as afternoon shadows lengthened across the porch. Thomas paced, alternating between threats and awkward appeals to family loyalty. Victoria's charm offensive devolved into thinly veiled accusations about my mental state. Melissa calculated aloud what my care must cost, implying I was being financially exploited by Miguel. Through it all, I remained silent, letting them exhaust themselves against the unmovable reality I'd created. Only Amber remained quiet, watching the performance with increasingly detached eyes. Finally, when their arguments began circling back on themselves, I raised my hand. "Enough," I said, my voice cutting through their noise. "You've had 6 weeks to adjust to your new circumstances. Tell me what you've learned." "Learned?" Thomas scoffed. "That you've lost your mind? That you never really loved us," Victoria added bitterly. "That money was always more important to you than family," Melissa concluded. I turned to Amber. "And you, great-granddaughter? What have you learned?" She met my gaze directly for the first time. "That I don't know how to do anything." Her honesty cut through the pretense. "That I built my entire identity around what I owned, not who I am." The others stared at her in shocked silence. "Continue," I encouraged. "I can't even make pasta without burning it," she admitted. "I've never paid a bill, never worked a real job, never finished anything difficult." Her voice strengthened. "But I've started figuring it out. Community college classes, a part-time job at a coffee shop, learning to live on what Jason makes." "And how does that feel?" I asked. "Terrible," she almost smiled. "And also, real, for the first time." Thomas recovered from his surprise. "Don't tell me you're buying into this manipulative nonsense, Amber. She's trying to break us, to make us beg." "Is that what you think this is about, Thomas?" I asked. "Making you beg? What else could it possibly be?" I gestured to Miguel, who brought forward a tablet. "I'd like to show you something." On screen appeared the security footage from my Manhattan office, dated 3 years earlier. In it, Thomas entered with Victoria when they thought I was at a medical appointment. They rifled through my desk, photographing documents, discussing how they could access more funds once I finally kicked the bucket. "I've known who you are for a very long time," I said, as Thomas's face drained of color. "This isn't about punishment. It's about honesty." Miguel advanced to another video, Melissa instructing household staff not to bother me with trivial family matters because I was declining rapidly, while I was in the next room, perfectly lucid. Finally, footage from Amber's wedding planning, where she laughed with friends about how the old lady doesn't even know how much everything costs, and how they could probably get another $50,000 for the honeymoon if we play it right. No one spoke as the videos ended. Even their righteous indignation had limits when confronted with their own unguarded moments. "I didn't show you these to shame you," I said quietly, "but to establish that we're past the point of pretending. I know exactly who you've become. The question is, do you? What do you want from us?" Amber asked again, but this time with genuine curiosity rather than accusation. "I want you to earn your inheritance." "By groveling for your approval?" Thomas sneered. "No, by becoming people worthy of what you'll receive." I nodded to Miguel, who distributed personalized folders to each family member. "Inside, you'll find individual proposals," I explained. "Not demands, but pathways, opportunities to reconnect with your potential." They opened the folders cautiously, as if expecting further humiliation. "This is absurd," Victoria said, scanning her document. "You expect me to use my social connections for actual charity work? To raise funds for causes rather than for my closet? You've always been brilliant at networking," I observed. "Why waste that talent on superficial pursuits?" Thomas stared at his proposal. "A position with the foundation helping senior entrepreneurs? I'm not qualified." "Precisely the point." Melissa's face flushed. "Managing affordable housing projects? This is beneath me." "Is helping families find homes they can afford beneath anyone?" Finally, Amber looked up from her folder. You want me to finish my degree and complete an internship with the company's social responsibility division? Yes. Why not just give us back our allowances with conditions attached? Thomas demanded. Why this elaborate scheme? Because money without meaning destroyed you once already, I replied simply. I won't make that mistake again. As they absorbed this, I continued. You have 1 week to decide. Accept these paths forward or continue on your current trajectory without my further intervention. Either way, the old arrangement is gone forever. And if we refuse, Victoria challenged, then you'll discover who you are without wealth to define you. Some might call that the ultimate inheritance. They left in stages, Thomas and Victoria first, fuming, Melissa shortly after, already on her phone seeking legal counsel. Amber lingered on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Atlantic gold. Why didn't you just tell us how you felt? She asked finally. Would you have listened? Her silence was answer enough. 3 months after the family confrontation, I received the first progress reports from the trustees overseeing my reformation project. Thomas had reluctantly begun work with the Senior Entrepreneur Program, showing up precisely on time and leaving the moment his required hours were completed. Victoria had organized one small fundraiser, leveraging her social connections with minimal effort. Melissa had attended exactly 2 affordable housing meetings, contributing nothing but complaints. Only Amber showed signs of genuine engagement. Her academic advisor reported consistent attendance and improving grades. Her internship supervisor noted initial reluctance transformed into growing curiosity about corporate social responsibility. They're doing the minimum to comply, Miguel observed as we reviewed the reports on my porch. It's a start, I replied. Transformation rarely begins with enthusiasm. That evening, my secure phone rang, a number I hadn't expected. Mrs. Blackwood, it's Jason. Hello, Jason. How is married life in reduced circumstances? He chuckled. Educational. That's actually why I'm calling. Amber wants to speak with you. Alone, not with the others. I considered this. She's welcome any time. Come. Without the family delegation, 2 days later, Amber arrived alone, having taken the bus from Portland after flying from New York. No longer the Instagram princess with perfect styling, she wore simple jeans and a sweater, her hair in a practical ponytail. Bisabuela, she said, the childhood nickname carrying new weight. Thank you for seeing me. Tea? I offered, gesturing to the service Christine had prepared. She served herself, then me, a small courtesy she'd never shown before. You look well, I observed. I've lost 12 pounds since the wedding, she admitted. Turns out cooking your own food and taking public transportation changes your body. And your mind? She smiled ruefully. That too. She set down her cup. I'm not here to beg for money. Why are you here then? To understand. She leaned forward. The others are just going through the motions, you know. Dad checks boxes at the foundation. Mom shows up for meetings and undermines everything. Grandma Victoria organized a charity shopping event where half the proceeds went to designer brands. And you? I'm changing. She said it with wonder. My marketing professor says I have natural talent when I actually apply myself. The CSR internship showed me how business can do more than generate profits. And Jason? Yes? He never cared about the money. He loves me, the real me, whoever that turns out to be. She paused. Why didn't you just cut us off years ago? Why the elaborate wedding setup? I studied my great-granddaughter, seeing shadows of myself in her direct gaze. Because you needed to see yourselves clearly, not through my disappointed eyes, but through your own actions. I sipped my tea. The wedding was a mirror. Amber, I merely removed the flattering filter. She nodded slowly. I've been thinking about something. The family always called you lucky, that you built your fortune through fortunate timing and connections. But that wasn't it at all, was it? What do you think it was? Work, sacrifice, thousands of difficult decisions. She hesitated. I found articles about you from the 1960s, how you were dismissed, undermined, laughed at for being a woman in real estate development, how you mortgaged everything for your first major project. You've been doing research. I never knew you, she said simply. I'm trying to change that. We talked for hours as afternoon stretched into evening. Not about money or inheritance, but about life, choices, resilience. For the first time, she asked questions about my journey rather than what I could provide for hers. As she prepared to leave, I asked, what will you tell the others? That you're still implementing your plan, That there are no shortcuts. She paused at the door. I used to think you were punishing us. Now I think you might be the only one who ever truly loved us. After she left, Miguel found me watching the ocean, tears on my weathered cheeks. Are you all right, Mrs. Blackwood? Yes, I whispered. For the first time in years, I think I might be. Sometimes, a single green shoot breaking through concrete offers more hope than an entire garden that's been meticulously maintained. 6 months after the wedding disaster, my attorneys reported the family had exhausted all legal avenues. 3 separate courts had upheld my financial restructuring. The psychiatric evaluation Thomas had demanded confirmed what I already knew. At 92, my mind remained sharper than his ever was. The family's responses to their new reality had diverged significantly. Thomas retreated into bitterness, doing minimal work at the foundation while drinking heavily. Victoria, finding her social circle drastically reduced without her spending power, began reluctantly applying her networking skills to actual charitable causes, discovering, perhaps to her surprise, that she had genuine talent for connecting resources with needs. Melissa vacillated between rage and grudging participation in the affordable housing program, occasionally showing flashes of the intelligence I'd always known she possessed. Her husband, freed from the shadow of Blackwood wealth, had started a small business that was showing promising returns. And Amber, my surprising Amber, had completed her first semester with a 3.8 GPA and received a formal commendation from her internship supervisor. She and Jason had moved to a slightly larger apartment, affording it through their combined income rather than my subsidy. I monitored it all from Maine, where winter had transformed the landscape into crystalline beauty. My health remained stable, though the cold aggravated my arthritis. At 92, every stable day was a victory. The trustees are requesting guidance, Miguel informed me one morning. Thomas is technically meeting the minimum requirements, but clearly sabotaging projects. Victoria is showing improvement, but demanding recognition. Melissa is using her position to build connections for her husband's business. And they're all still waiting for me to relent, I concluded. Yes, except perhaps Amber. That afternoon, as snow fell outside my window, my secure line rang with an unexpected caller. Thomas. Mother, he said, his voice carrying the slight slur I recognized from his decades of functional alcoholism. We need to talk. I'm listening. This has gone on long enough. You've made your point. Have I? What point would that be? He sighed heavily. That we took you for granted. That we should be more appreciative of your contributions. Is that what you think this is about? Appreciation? What else? You're punishing us because we didn't thank you enough for your money. Even now, he couldn't see it. Thomas, this has never been about gratitude. It's about growth. I'm 65 years old, Mother. Too old for growth. No one is too old for growth. I started building Blackwood Enterprises at 35. I'm reinventing your inheritance at 92. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he asked, what will it take to end this? Just tell me what you want. I want you to become the man you could have been without the crutch of wealth, the man your father would have been proud of. And if I can't be that man, the vulnerability in his question, the first real honesty between us in decades, caught me off guard. Then be a better man than you were, I said softly. That's all any of us can do. 3 days later, the trustees reported something unexpected. Thomas had voluntarily entered a rehabilitation program for alcohol dependency. Not the luxury facility he would have chosen before, but a practical program with solid outcomes. 2 weeks after that, Victoria organized a legitimate fundraiser that netted 6 figures for veterans' housing, and declined to skim her usual coordination fee from the proceeds. Melissa, though still complaining, had identified 3 viable properties for affordable housing development, applying her natural business acumen to a problem she'd previously ignored. Change was happening, however reluctantly. On a cold February morning, as I reviewed these developments with Miguel, he asked the question that had been hanging between us for months. When will you tell them? I looked up from my reports. Tell them what? About your diagnosis. The real reason for the timeline. I touched the medical file he referred to, the one documenting the advancing heart condition that gave me perhaps 1 more year. The condition I'd hidden from the family while implementing Protocol Cinderella. They don't need to know, I said finally. This isn't about my departure, but their journey. They'll figure it out eventually. Perhaps, by then, Hopefully they'll understand it was never about the money. I wheeled myself to the window, watching snowflakes swirl against the glass, each one unique, temporary, and perfect in its moment of existence. They think this is about inheritance, I said quietly. They're right, but not in the way they imagine. The real inheritance has nothing to do with bank accounts or property deeds. What is it? Then, Miguel asked, the knowledge that they are capable of standing on their own, that they have value beyond what they possess. I smiled. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. Outside, the snow continued falling, covering everything in possibility. 1 year after the wedding that changed everything, I celebrated my 93rd birthday in the Manhattan penthouse I hadn't visited since implementing Protocol Cinderella. My health had declined enough that the journey required medical supervision, but I was determined to see firsthand what my experiment had wrought. The family gathered not out of obligation, but invitation, my first to them since their world collapsed. They entered cautiously, as if expecting another financial ambush. Thomas arrived first, 6 months sober, his face thinner but his eyes clearer than they'd been in decades. The foundation work had evolved from obligation to vocation as he discovered a talent for connecting experienced entrepreneurs with eager students. Victoria followed, her designer wardrobe simplified, but her social calendar surprisingly full. She'd leveraged her networking prowess into a consulting position with 3 major charities, providing value that had nothing to do with her bank account. Melissa and her husband entered together, their relationship visibly transformed. With the pressure of maintaining appearances removed, they'd rediscovered why they'd married in the first place. The affordable housing project had evolved from punishment to passion, as Melissa applied her business acumen to problems that actually mattered. Amber and Jason arrived last. My great-granddaughter, now in her final semester with plans for graduate school, had grown into a poised young woman whose Instagram now documented corporate sustainability initiatives rather than shopping sprees. "Welcome," I said, as Miguel wheeled me into the living room where they waited. "Thank you for coming." The awkwardness was palpable until Amber stepped forward, kneeling beside my wheelchair. "Happy birthday, bisabuela," she said, presenting a small package wrapped in simple paper. Inside was a journal filled with photographs I'd never seen. Amber at her coffee shop job, her first A+ college paper, the community garden she'd helped establish in Brooklyn. The inscription read, "To the woman who taught me that losing everything can mean finding yourself. With love and gratitude, Amber." The others presented their gifts, not purchased, but meaningful. Thomas brought a handcrafted box made by a veteran he'd mentored. Victoria offered a scrapbook of the charity events she'd organized. Melissa presented architectural plans for an affordable senior housing complex she'd designed. Over dinner, served at a table where my wheelchair fit perfectly at the head, conversation flowed without the artificial politeness or barely concealed resentment of previous gatherings. They spoke of challenges overcome, lessons learned, unexpected joys discovered in simpler living. "A toast," Thomas said, raising his sparkling water, "to Mother, who had the courage to do what we needed, not what we wanted. To Eleanor," Victoria added, "who showed us the difference between having value and creating it. To Grandmother," Melissa continued, "who taught us it's never too late to reinvent yourself. To bisabuela," Amber concluded, "who reminded us that family isn't defined by what we give each other, but by how we help each other grow." As the evening concluded, I asked to speak with each of them privately. To Thomas, I confirmed his position at the foundation would be permanent, funded by a dedicated endowment. To Victoria, I offered partnership in a new charitable initiative targeting women's economic empowerment. To Melissa, I provided resources for her affordable housing vision, structured as investment rather than gift. To Amber and Jason, I gave the keys to a modest but beautiful brownstone, not free, but with a fair mortgage they could manage together. "Are you giving everything back?" Amber asked when we were alone. "No," I answered honestly. "I'm investing in who you've become, not enabling who you were. The others think you've forgiven us, that this is a return to normal. And you? I think you've given us something better than money," she said. "You've given us ourselves." Later, as Miguel helped me prepare for bed, my tired heart fluttering in my chest, he asked, "Was it worth it? The risk? The confrontation? The year of estrangement?" I thought of Thomas's clear eyes, Victoria's purposeful energy, Melissa's rediscovered partnership, Amber's hard-earned wisdom. They seated me by the trash at a wedding I paid for, I said. Tonight, they placed me at the head of the table and truly saw me for the first time in years. I smiled. Yes, Miguel, it was worth everything. 3 months later, when my heart finally surrendered to time, my family gathered again, not as entitled heirs, but as individuals standing firmly on the foundations of their own accomplishments. The true protocol Cinderella had never been about midnight deadlines or glass slippers, but transformation. They discovered my final gift wasn't the carefully structured trust that would support without enabling them, nor the company shares distributed based on merit rather than birthright. It was the letter I left, my final words to the family I'd loved enough to disappoint. The greatest inheritance I could leave wasn't built of money, but of meaning. Not purchased, but earned. You seated me by the trash at a wedding I paid for. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.